Jasmine Williams couldn't help but smile as she placed the last of her framed photos on the bookshelf. After years of saving every extra penny from her software engineering job, she had finally done it, bought her very own place in the Oakwood Apartments, a building she had admired from afar for years. The condo wasn't huge, but with its large windows and modern kitchen, it felt like a palace compared to the tiny rental she'd been crammed into for the past 5 years. "Home sweet home," she whispered to herself, running her hand along the smooth countertop. The moving company had left hours ago, and though boxes still cluttered most of the living room, Jasmine felt a deep sense of pride. At 32, she had achieved something her parents had always dreamed of but never managed: owning property in a good neighborhood. The late afternoon sun streamed through the blinds, casting long shadows across the hardwood floors. Jasmine checked her watch. She had promised her boss she'd finish reviewing some code tonight, which meant setting up her home office was a priority. She dug through a box labeled "Tsh Stuff" in her own messy handwriting and pulled out her router and laptop. "Let's get you connected to the world," she said, setting up her workspace at the kitchen table, the only furniture currently free of boxes. The internet installation guy had come yesterday, hooked everything up, and left her with a small card containing the default network name and password. Standard procedure. Once her laptop powered on, Jasmine noticed something odd. The Wi-Fi showed full bars, but web pages were loading painfully slowly. She frowned, clicking on her browser's network diagnostic tools, a habit from years of troubleshooting glitches. "That's weird," she muttered, leaning closer to the screen. According to the network statistics, at least 3 unknown devices were currently connected to her Wi-Fi. She refreshed the page, thinking it must be a mistake. Same result. Someone was definitely using her internet connection. Jasmine felt a flash of annoyance. The building had about 20 units. Did someone just make a habit of hopping onto whatever open networks they could find? Or maybe the installation technician had set up multiple units with the same default password. Either way, Jasmine wasn't having it. She had paid good money for this high-speed connection, and she wasn't about to share it with strangers. Plus, having unknown people on your network was a serious security risk, something she knew all too well from her cybersecurity courses. She navigated to her router's admin page and examined the connected devices more carefully. One appeared to be a smart TV, another was labeled simply as Karen's iPhone, and the third was some kind of gaming console. "Well, Karen, whoever you are, time to find your own internet," Jasmine said, slightly amused but mostly irritated. She quickly changed the default password to a complex combination of letters, numbers, and symbols, Mango2Blueski97. Something she could remember but would be nearly impossible to guess. For good measure, she also enabled 2-factor authentication, requiring a text message code for any new devices trying to connect. Satisfied with her security measures, Jasmine watched as, one by one, the unknown devices disappeared from her network. The speed immediately improved. With her internet now properly secured, Jasmine decided she deserved a break. She rummaged through another box until she found her electric kettle and a tin of loose-leaf tea her mother had given her as a housewarming gift. As the water heated, she wandered to the large window overlooking the tree-lined street below. The neighborhood was quiet this evening, with just a few people walking dogs or returning from work. An older woman with blonde hair was standing on the sidewalk, staring intently at her phone with a frustrated expression. Jasmine didn't think much of it. She made her tea, found her favorite mug among the kitchen boxes, and settled into the only chair she had unpacked, feeling content. Tomorrow would bring more unpacking and organizing, but for tonight, she was happy to simply exist in her new space, her very own home, secure and peaceful. Little did Jasmine know that her simple act of changing a Wi-Fi password was about to unleash a storm that would expose secrets hidden within the walls of Oakwood Apartments for over a year and test her in ways she never expected. Jasmine woke early the next morning, sunlight streaming through curtains she hadn't had time to hang properly. For a moment, she didn't recognize where she was, surrounded by towers of boxes and unfamiliar walls. Then it hit her. This was her place. Her very own condo. The thought brought a smile to her face as she stretched and reached for her phone. She scrolled through work emails while making coffee, an old habit she couldn't shake even on weekends. One message from her boss caught her attention, a last-minute client meeting on Monday morning. She'd need to prepare some presentations, which meant finishing her home office setup was now even more urgent. Better get to it, she muttered to herself, pouring coffee into a travel mug she'd dug out from a kitchen box. She hadn't made much progress unpacking yesterday after securing her Wi-Fi, and the clock was ticking. Jasmine spent the next few hours assembling her desk and office chair, positioning them near the large living room window where natural light flooded in. She hung a few plants from hooks in the ceiling, small touches that made the space feel more like her own. By midday, sweat beaded on her forehead as she connected cables and organized her dual monitors. "Just like at work," she said with satisfaction, stepping back to admire her setup. With her desk arranged, she powered up her computer system and connected to her newly secured Wi-Fi. The internet speed was noticeably faster today. No unwanted guests hogging her bandwidth. Still, something about the situation bothered her. She opened her network diagnostic tools again and reviewed the log from yesterday. Those unknown devices had been connected for hours before she noticed. Who did they belong to? And how long had they been using the connection? Curiosity got the better of her. Jasmine did a quick search for her internet provider's customer service number and dialed. "Thank you for calling Techstream Internet. How can I help you today?" The voice on the other end sounded tired but professional. "Hi there," Jasmine said. "I just moved into a new place and set up my internet yesterday. I'm wondering how long this account has been active at this address." After verifying her identity and account details, the representative went quiet for a moment. "That's strange. According to our records, this account has been active at your address for almost 18 months. Jasmine frowned. "That's impossible. I just moved in last week, and the place was empty for at least 3 months before that, according to my real estate agent." "Let me check something else," the representative said. More clicking sounds came through the phone. "The bills have been paid on time each month from the same credit card. Would you like to verify the last 4 digits?" When the representative read them out, Jasmine didn't recognize the numbers. "That's not my card. Could someone have been paying for internet at my address? It's unusual, but not impossible. The previous tenant might have continued service despite moving out. Or..." The representative paused. "Sometimes people set up service at addresses other than their own. I can't speculate, but I'd recommend securing your network if you haven't already." "I did that yesterday," Jasmine said, thinking about the unknown devices she'd kicked off. "Could you tell me when the last payment was made?" 3 days ago. The system processed an automatic payment of $79.99. Jasmine thanked the representative and hung up, feeling uneasy. Someone had been paying for internet at her address for over a year, including during the months the condo sat empty, and they were still paying for it now, even though she had taken over the physical connection. She walked to her window, coffee in hand, and looked out at the building across the courtyard. Dozens of windows, dozens of strangers. Was one of them the mysterious bill payer? And if so, why would they keep paying for internet they couldn't access anymore? As if in answer to her unspoken question, her doorbell rang. The sudden noise made her jump, sloshing coffee onto her shirt. "Coming," she called, dabbing at the stain with a tissue. She wasn't expecting visitors. She barely knew anyone in the building yet. When she pulled open the door, a woman with highlighted blonde hair styled in an immaculate bob stood in the hallway. She wore pressed khaki pants and a polo shirt with the Oakwood Apartments logo embroidered on the chest. She looked to be in her late 40s, with thin lips pressed into a tight line. The woman's arms were crossed, and her foot tapped impatiently against the hallway carpet. The moment their eyes met, Jasmine felt a chill that had nothing to do with the building's air conditioning. The woman's gaze was cold, assessing, and unmistakably angry. "Are you the one who changed the Wi-Fi password?" the woman demanded without introduction. Jasmine blinked, taken aback by the stranger's tone. "Excuse me." "The internet," the woman said, speaking slowly as if to a child. "It stopped working yesterday. I need you to fix it. Now." In that moment, Jasmine realized her simple act of digital security was about to complicate her life in ways she couldn't have imagined. And she had a sinking feeling that the woman at her door was the owner of Karen's iPhone. She had kicked off her network. Jasmine stood in her doorway, coffee stains spreading on her shirt, staring at the angry woman before her. She took a deep breath, trying to process what was happening. "I'm sorry, but who are you?" Jasmine asked, keeping her voice calm despite the stranger's hostility. The woman's eyes narrowed. "I'm Karen Whitfield from Unit 3B. I live upstairs." She pointed toward the ceiling with a manicured finger. "And since you moved in, my internet has stopped working." Jasmine's mind raced. This woman lived upstairs, yet somehow thought she had a right to use Jasmine's internet connection. She chose her next words carefully. "Nice to meet you, Ms. Whitfield. I'm Jasmine, the new owner of this unit. I think there might be some confusion. The internet connection in my condo is one that I'm paying for." Karen scoffed, shifting her weight impatiently. "Look, I don't care what you want to call it. The Wi-Fi has been working perfectly fine for me for over a year. Then you show up and suddenly it's not working. Just change it back." Jasmine felt her patience slipping, but she maintained her composure. "I changed the password on my own Wi-Fi network yesterday because I noticed unauthorized devices using it. If you need internet, you should set up your own account. Do you know how much of a hassle that is?" Karen's voice rose. "Installation fees, waiting for technicians, equipment costs. Why would I do all that when the internet was working just fine before you messed with it?" A door opened down the hallway, and an elderly man peeked out, curious about the commotion. Karen noticed him too and lowered her voice, though her tone remained sharp. "Listen," Karen said, leaning closer to Jasmine, "I've lived in this building for 8 years. I know everyone here. I'm on the residence committee and my brother-in-law is the HOA president. You're new. You don't want to start off on the wrong foot." The implied threat wasn't subtle. Jasmine felt a flicker of anger but pushed it down. This wasn't worth losing her temper over. "I understand you're frustrated," Jasmine said, "but that doesn't change the fact that you've been using someone else's internet connection without permission. That's actually against the law." Karen's face flushed red. "Are you threatening me?" "Not at all," Jasmine replied calmly. "I'm just explaining the situation. I pay for my internet service, and I have the right to secure it for my use only." "You have no idea who you're dealing with," Karen hissed. She pulled out her phone and held it up like a weapon. "No signal, see? I have important emails to check. Business emails. I run my own company from home." Jasmine doubted that was true, given Karen's desperate need to steal internet, but she didn't say so. "There's a coffee shop with free Wi-Fi just down the street. You could use that until you get your own service set up." "This is ridiculous," Karen snapped. "I've been in this building way longer than you. That internet has always worked for me before." A realization dawned on Jasmine. "Wait, did you know the previous owner of my unit?" "What?" "No, of course not," Karen said too quickly, avoiding eye contact. The signal reaches my apartment, that's all. It's always been that way." Something wasn't adding up. Jasmine remembered what the customer service representative had told her. The account had been active for 18 months, even when the condo was empty, and the bills were still being paid. "Ms. Whitfield, were you paying for the internet service to my unit?" Jasmine asked directly. Karen's expression shifted from anger to something more guarded. "That's none of your business." "Actually, if you've been paying for service to my address, it very much is my business," Jasmine countered. "Especially since I'm now paying for it too." "You don't understand anything," Karen said, backing away slightly. "The tenant before you had no problem with our arrangement. He got cheaper internet, I got a connection. Everybody won." "So you admit you set up internet service to my address?" Jasmine pressed. "I didn't say that." Karen's voice rose again. "Stop putting words in my mouth." The elderly neighbor's door opened wider. "Everything okay out here?" he called. "It's fine, Mr. Chen," Karen called back with a suddenly sweet voice. "Just introducing myself to our new neighbor." The transformation was jarring. Mr. Chen nodded skeptically before closing his door again. Karen turned back to Jasmine, her fake smile instantly vanishing. "Look, I need that internet connection. Just give me the new password and we can forget this unpleasantness." Jasmine stood her ground. "I'm sorry, but no. I pay for my own internet, and I don't feel comfortable sharing it with people I don't know. You need to get your own service." "You're making a big mistake," Karen warned, her eyes cold. "This isn't over." Before Jasmine could respond, Karen turned on her heel, and marched toward the elevator, punching the button with unnecessary force. Jasmine closed her door, her hands trembling slightly. What had just happened? She leaned against the door, mind racing. There was definitely something strange going on. Why would Karen be so invested in using Jasmine's internet? And what did she mean by their arrangement with the previous tenant? Feeling unsettled, Jasmine walked to her kitchen and poured herself another cup of coffee. She had a feeling she would need the caffeine. Something told her that Karen Whitfield wasn't the type to give up easily. As she sipped her coffee, staring out at the sunny day that now felt considerably less bright, Jasmine couldn't shake the feeling that she had just made an enemy, all because she'd had the audacity to password protect her own Wi-Fi. Jasmine tried to shake off her unsettling encounter with Karen and return to unpacking. She still had dozens of boxes to sort through, and Monday's client meeting wasn't going to prepare itself. She put on some music, hoping the upbeat tunes would help her focus on organizing her new home rather than dwelling on her angry neighbor. About 20 minutes later, just as she was arranging books on her shelf, she heard a firm knock at her door. Not the impatient rapping of Karen's knuckles this time, but something more official sounding. 3 measured knocks in quick succession. Now what? Jasmine muttered, putting down the stack of books. She wasn't expecting any deliveries, and she certainly wasn't in the mood for another confrontation with Karen. When she opened the door, her stomach dropped. 2 police officers stood in the hallway, a tall woman with her hair pulled back in a tight bun and a shorter man with salt and pepper hair. Both wore serious expressions. "Good afternoon, ma'am," the female officer said. "I'm Officer Rodriguez, and this is Officer Thompson. Are you Jasmine Williams?" Jasmine nodded, her mouth suddenly dry. "Yes, that's me. Is something wrong?" Officer Thompson glanced down at his notepad. "We received a call about a possible cybercrime at this address. Someone reported that their internet access was compromised by a hacker in this unit." It took Jasmine a moment to process what was happening. Then it clicked. Karen had called the police on her for changing her own Wi-Fi password. The absurdity of it almost made her laugh, but the serious faces of the officers kept her composed. "I think I know what this is about," Jasmine said carefully. "My upstairs neighbor came by earlier, upset because she can no longer access my Wi-Fi network after I changed the password yesterday." The officers exchanged glances. Officer Rodriguez's eyebrow raised slightly. "Ma'am, we received a call from a Karen Whitfield claiming that her new neighbor, and she specifically mentioned the new black woman in 2B, had hacked her computer and stolen her internet access," Officer Rodriguez said, clearly uncomfortable repeating the complaint. Jasmine felt a flash of anger at Karen's choice of words. Of course she had made it about race. She took a deep breath. "Officers, I just moved in last week. I set up internet service with TechStream. Yesterday I noticed unknown devices using my network, so I changed the password. That's the extent of what happened." Officer Thompson nodded. "May we come in for a moment, just to sort this out?" Jasmine hesitated but stepped aside to let them in. "Excuse the boxes, I'm still unpacking." The officers followed her into the living room, carefully navigating around stacks of books and partially assembled furniture. Jasmine gestured toward her couch, now freed from its plastic wrapping but still covered with throw pillows she hadn't found places for yet. "Would you like some water?" she offered automatically, falling back on her mother's lessons about hosting guests, even if those guests were police officers responding to a ridiculous complaint. "No thank you, ma'am," Officer Thompson said. "We just need to understand what's going on here." Jasmine sat across from them in her office chair, the only other available seat in the room. "Like I said, I changed my Wi-Fi password. Ms. Whitfield came down this morning, demanding I change it back because she's apparently been using it without permission for some time." "Do you have proof that this is your internet service?" Officer Rodriguez asked. Jasmine nodded, reaching for her laptop. "I can show you my account with TechStream. I've been paying for it since I moved in." She pulled up the website and logged in, then turned the screen toward the officers. "See? Here's my account information and my first payment from last week." Officer Thompson leaned forward, studying the screen. "And you said Ms. Whitfield was using your internet without your knowledge?" "Yes," Jasmine confirmed. "When I checked my router yesterday, I found several unknown devices connected to it, including one labeled Karen's iPhone." The officers exchanged another look. There's something else that's strange, Jasmine continued, feeling more confident. When I called Techstream customer service this morning, they told me this account has been active at my address for 18 months, but I just moved in last week, and the condo was vacant for months before I bought it. Officer Rodriguez's eyebrows shot up. 18 months? And it wasn't under your name before you moved in? Jasmine shook her head. No, but the customer service rep said the bills have been paid monthly from the same credit card. A card that isn't mine. Do you mind if I make a call? Officer Thompson asked, standing up and moving toward the kitchen for privacy. While he was on the phone, Officer Rodriguez spoke more softly. I apologize for the disturbance, Ms. Williams. We have to respond to all calls, but she trailed off, looking uncomfortable. But this is clearly not a cybercrime, Jasmine finished for her. I understand you doing your job. I'm just shocked someone would call 911 over a Wi-Fi password. Officer Thompson returned, his expression serious. Ms. Williams, I just spoke with my sergeant. Based on what you've told us, there may be a case of service theft or identity fraud happening here. Ms. Whitfield may have been using your address to set up services fraudulently. Jasmine's eyes widened. So she might have been paying for internet to my address so she could use it from her apartment. Is that even legal? It's complicated, Officer Rodriguez said. But no, generally not legal, especially if she used someone else's information to set it up. Officer Thompson pulled out a business card and handed it to Jasmine. We're going to need to look into this further. In the meantime, if Ms. Whitfield causes any more disturbances, please don't hesitate to call us. The irony wasn't lost on Jasmine, so I should call 911 on her. Officer Rodriguez smiled slightly. The non-emergency line would be fine. This number. She pointed to the card. As the officers prepared to leave, Jasmine had a thought. Officers, may I ask, what exactly did Ms. Whitfield say when she called 911? I'm just trying to understand why she would do this. The officers exchanged another uncomfortable glance before Officer Thompson sighed. She claimed you moved in and immediately hacked into her personal computer, stole her banking information, and cut off her internet access. She said, and I quote, "These people think they can get away with anything." Jasmine felt a chill at the thinly veiled racism in Karen's complaint. I see. For what it's worth, Officer Rodriguez added, we knew something wasn't right about the call, but we have to follow up on everything. After the officers left, Jasmine sank back into her chair, suddenly exhausted. Her perfect new home didn't feel quite so perfect anymore. What kind of neighbor calls the police with false accusations just because they can't use someone else's Wi-Fi? She picked up her phone, considering whether to call her parents or her best friend to vent about the situation. But as she scrolled through her contacts, a notification appeared on her screen, an email from Techstream Internet. The subject line made her sit up straight. Suspicious activity detected on your account. Jasmine stared at her phone, reading the email notification again. Suspicious activity detected on your account. With trembling fingers, she tapped to open it. Dear valued customer, the message began. Our security system has detected unusual login attempts to your Techstream account from multiple devices and locations in the past 24 hours. If you did not authorize these login attempts, please contact our security team immediately. Jasmine felt a chill run down her spine. This had to be Karen trying to get back into the Wi-Fi. She immediately dialed the number listed in the email. Techstream Security, how can I help you? A deep voice answered. Hi, this is Jasmine Williams. I just received an email about suspicious activity on my account, she explained, pacing around her living room. Yes, Ms. Williams, we've detected several login attempts using different passwords. The attempts are coming from a device that's been previously authorized on your network, but is now being denied access due to password changes. That would be my neighbor, Jasmine said, shaking her head in disbelief. She's been trying to hack into my account. It appears so, the security specialist confirmed. I recommend changing your account password immediately, not just your Wi-Fi password. I can help you set up additional security measures as well. After spending 15 minutes adding extra security to her account, Jasmine hung up and flopped onto her couch. What had started as a simple password change was snowballing into something much bigger. She couldn't understand why Karen was so desperate to use her internet connection. Her thoughts were interrupted by a gentle knock at the door. Not Karen's impatient rapping or the police's official knock, something softer. Warily, Jasmine approached the door and checked the peephole. An older Asian man stood outside, the same neighbor who had peeked out during her confrontation with Karen. She opened the door cautiously. "Hello? Ms. Williams? I'm Tom Chen from apartment 2C, just down the hall," he said with a kind smile. "I couldn't help overhearing some of what happened earlier. May I speak with you for a moment?" Jasmine hesitated, but something about Mr. Chen's gentle demeanor made her feel she could trust him. "Of course, come in." Mr. Chen entered, carefully stepping around her boxes. "I apologize for intruding, but I thought you should know, this isn't the first time Karen has caused problems in the building." Jasmine gestured toward the couch, and they both sat. "What do you mean?" "Karen Whitfield has been running schemes in this building for years," Mr. Chen explained, lowering his voice as if afraid of being overheard. "Last year, she collected money for a building improvement fund that never materialized. Before that, she was charging new residents for mandatory parking permits that weren't actually required. And nobody's reported her?" Jasmine asked, surprised. Mr. Chen sighed. "Her brother-in-law really is on the HOA board. Most people don't want to make trouble. But this Wi-Fi business, this is new." Jasmine thought for a moment. "Mr. Chen, did you know the previous owner of my unit?" "David? Yes, nice young man. Very busy, traveled a lot for work. He moved out about 4 months ago for a job in Seattle." "4 months?" Jasmine repeated. "But my real estate agents said the condo had only been vacant for 3 months when I bought it." Mr. Chen shook his head. "No, definitely 4 months. I remember because it was right after the New Year's party." Jasmine frowned. "And during those 4 months, was anyone coming in and out of the condo?" "Not that I noticed," Mr. Chen said, then paused. "Well, except for Karen. She told everyone she was keeping an eye on the place while it was on the market." Pieces were starting to fall into place. "Mr. Chen, I think Karen might have been using my address to set up internet service in someone else's name." Mr. Chen's eyes widened. "That would explain something else. About 3 months ago, I saw a texturing installation van outside. Karen told everyone they were just doing building-wide maintenance, but they were only here for about an hour." "That fits the timeline," Jasmine said, thinking aloud. "If the previous owner canceled his service when he moved out, Karen might have set up a new account in someone else's name and had it installed in my empty condo." "But why go through all that trouble?" Mr. Chen asked. "Why not just get her own internet?" Jasmine thought about the multiple devices she'd seen connected to her network. "I'm not sure. Maybe she's running something that needs multiple internet connections, or maybe—" Her phone buzzed with an incoming call from an unknown number. Usually, she'd let it go to voicemail, but something told her to answer. "Hello. Ms. Williams, this is Detective Rivera with the Cybercrime Division. Officers Rodriguez and Thompson forwarded your case to me. I'd like to ask you some questions about the internet service at your address." Jasmine exchanged a look with Mr. Chen. "Yes, of course. We've spoken with TechStream, and there's something concerning about the account history at your address. Before your legitimate account was established last week, there was another account registered to a David Lee, the previous owner. But after he closed his account 4 months ago, a new one was opened under the name Alex Johnson." "I don't know any Alex Johnson," Jasmine said. "We don't think this person exists," Detective Rivera explained. "The social security number used to open the account belongs to a deceased individual. The address listed for billing is your address, apartment 2B, but the phone number and email belong to Karen Whitfield in apartment 3B. Mr. Chen's eyebrows shot up at this confirmation. "I think she's been using my empty condo to host the router while accessing it from her apartment," Jasmine said. "That's our suspicion as well," the detective agreed. "And it's not just your address. We've discovered similar setups at 3 other addresses in your building, all properties that were vacant for some period in the last 2 years." Jasmine struggled to understand. "But why? What's the point of all this?" We're still investigating, but based on the unusually high bandwidth usage, we suspect she might be running some kind of operation that requires multiple high-speed connections, Detective Rivera said. We'd like your permission to examine your router. It might provide evidence of what kind of data was being transmitted. Of course, Jasmine agreed immediately. After arranging for a technician to visit later that day, Jasmine hung up and turned to Mr. Chen, who looked as shocked as she felt. I never liked that woman, he admitted, but identity theft, that's serious. Jasmine nodded, still processing everything. I can't believe my Wi-Fi password change uncovered all this. As Mr. Chen prepared to leave, he paused at her door. Be careful, Ms. Williams. Karen won't like having her schemes exposed. After he left, Jasmine locked her door and leaned against it, her mind racing. What exactly had Karen been doing with all these internet connections? And more importantly, now that she was backed into a corner, what would she do next? Later that afternoon, a knock at Jasmine's door announced the arrival of Detective Rivera and a tech specialist from the cybercrime unit. The detective was younger than Jasmine had expected, with dark-rimmed glasses and a serious expression that softened when she introduced herself. Thank you for meeting with us, Ms. Williams, Detective Rivera said. This is Ben from our technical team. He'll be examining your router if that's still okay with you. Jasmine nodded, leading them to her home office where the router blinked silently on her desk. It's right here. Can I get you both some water or coffee? Water would be great, Ben said as he pulled out a laptop and various cables from his bag. He was already focused on the task, barely looking up as he connected his equipment to her router. While Ben worked, Detective Rivera sat with Jasmine at her small kitchen table. We've been gathering more information since we spoke earlier, she explained, opening a folder. The situation is more complex than we initially thought. Jasmine leaned forward. What have you found? Karen Whitfield works part-time as an administrative assistant at Oakwood Property Management, Detective Rivera said. That gives her access to tenant applications, including social security numbers, previous addresses, and other personal information. So she's been using that information to set up these accounts? Jasmine asked, appalled. The detective nodded. We believe so. So far, we've identified 6 different internet accounts in your building alone, all connected to Karen in some way, and all using identities of either previous tenants or deceased individuals. A chill ran down Jasmine's spine. That's disturbing. But I still don't understand why. Why go through all this trouble for extra internet? As if on cue, Ben called from the office. Detective, you're going to want to see this. They joined him at the desk, where he pointed to his laptop screen filled with graphs and numbers. This router has been handling an enormous amount of data traffic, way more than typical home use. The pattern is consistent with cryptocurrency mining operations. Crypto mining? Jasmine repeated, confused. Ben nodded enthusiastically, pushing his glasses up his nose. It's how new cryptocurrency coins are created. Computers solve complex mathematical problems, which requires serious processing power and uses a ton of bandwidth. The more connections you have, the more mining you can do. And the more money you can make, Detective Rivera added. Exactly, Ben confirmed. Based on these logs, someone has been running multiple mining rigs for at least the past 4 months, connecting through this router and probably others in the building. Detective Rivera turned to Jasmine. Do you have any equipment here that you didn't bring with you? Anything left behind by the previous owner or the property management? Jasmine thought for a moment. No, the place was completely empty when I moved in. But, she paused, remembering something. The day I moved in, Karen offered to show me the building's storage units in the basement. She said each unit comes with one. But when we got down there, she told me mine wasn't ready yet, and she'd let me know when it was. I haven't heard anything since. Detective Rivera and Ben exchanged glances. I'd like to see these storage units, the detective said. 20 minutes later, after a quick call to the building manager, the 3 of them stood in the basement hallway lined with storage cage units. Each unit was secured with a padlock and labeled with an apartment number. That's strange, Jasmine said, pointing to a unit marked 2B, her apartment. Karen told me this wasn't ready. It has a lock on it, Detective Rivera observed. Someone's using it. The building manager, a nervous man named Paul who kept dabbing at his forehead with a handkerchief, fumbled with a large ring of keys. According to our records, this unit should be empty and unlocked, ready for Ms. Williams to use. Can you open it for us? Detective Rivera asked, showing her badge. Paul found the master key and unlocked the padlock. When he slid the cage door open, they all stared in disbelief. Inside the small storage space were 6 computer towers, all humming loudly with fans whirring at full speed. Cables snaked between the machines and up through a small hole drilled in the ceiling. Lights blinked rapidly on each tower, and the heat emanating from the space was substantial. "That's a mining rig," Ben said, whistling low. "A pretty sophisticated one, too." "Is this legal?" Jasmine asked. "Cryptocurrency mining itself isn't illegal," Detective Rivera explained. "But stealing people's identities to set up internet accounts, using property without permission, stealing electricity from the building to power these machines, those are definitely crimes." Paul looked horrified. "She drilled through the ceiling? And these machines, they must be why the building's electricity bill has been so high. The HOA has been raising maintenance fees to cover it." Detective Rivera examined the setup closely without touching anything. "These cables probably connect to the routers in each of the apartments she's been using, including yours, Ms. Williams. She's been spreading the bandwidth usage across multiple accounts to avoid raising flags with the internet provider. And making money the whole time," Ben added. "Based on the setup, I'd estimate she's been earning between $3,000 and $5,000 a month, depending on crypto prices." Jasmine was stunned. "All this because I changed my Wi-Fi password?" Detective Rivera smiled. "Sometimes the smallest actions can unravel the biggest schemes." Speaking of which, she pulled out her radio. "I need to call this in. We'll need to get a formal search warrant for Ms. Whitfield's apartment. I suspect we'll find more equipment there." As they waited for additional officers to arrive, Paul continued to stare at the mining rig in disbelief. "I can't believe this has been going on under our noses. No wonder she was so eager to be on the maintenance committee and have keys to the building's facilities." Jasmine felt a strange mix of emotions: shock at the extent of Karen's operation, relief that she wasn't just being paranoid, and a touch of satisfaction that changing her Wi-Fi password had exposed this whole scheme. "What happens now?" she asked Detective Rivera. "Now we gather evidence, build our case, and pay Ms. Whitfield a visit," the detective said, her expression serious. "Identity theft is a federal crime. So is wire fraud. She's going to have a lot of explaining to do." As they headed back upstairs, Jasmine heard a commotion in the lobby. When they rounded the corner, she saw Karen arguing loudly with another police officer who had just arrived. When Karen spotted Jasmine with Detective Rivera, her face drained of color. "You," she said, pointing an accusing finger at Jasmine. "This is all your fault." Detective Rivera stepped forward. "Karen Whitfield, we need to ask you some questions about the cryptocurrency mining operation in the storage unit registered to apartment 2B, as well as multiple accounts of identity theft connected to internet services in this building." Karen's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. She looked from the detective to Jasmine, then to Paul, who was still dabbing nervously at his forehead. "I don't know what you're talking about," Karen insisted, but her trembling voice betrayed her. "This is ridiculous. I'm calling my lawyer." "That's your right," Detective Rivera said calmly. "In fact, I recommend it." As Karen fumbled for her phone, Jasmine couldn't help but think how a simple Wi-Fi password change had exposed a criminal operation that had been running right under everyone's noses for months, maybe years. Sometimes, the smallest actions could have the biggest consequences. 2 weeks later, Jasmine sat with a cup of tea on her now fully furnished balcony, enjoying the morning sunshine. Her condo finally felt like home, with pictures on the walls, books on the shelves, and not a moving box in sight. The chaos of her first weekend at Oakwood Apartments seemed like a distant memory, though the aftermath was still unfolding. Her phone buzzed with a text from Detective Rivera. "Thought you'd want to know. Karen's taking a plea deal. Identity theft, wire fraud, unauthorized computer access, utility theft. Looking at 3 to 5 years plus restitution." Jasmine shook her head in amazement. All this because she changed her Wi-Fi password. She typed back a quick, "Thanks for letting me know," and set her phone down. The past 2 weeks had been a whirlwind. After Karen's arrest, local news had picked up the story. "Crypto criminal caught after Wi-Fi password change," read one headline. Reporters had even shown up at the building, hoping to interview residents. Jasmine had politely declined, preferring to stay out of the spotlight. A knock at her door interrupted her thoughts. Probably Mr. Chen. They'd fallen into a routine of morning coffee every few days. She'd come to appreciate his friendship and the stories he shared about the neighborhood's history. But when she opened the door, she found not just Mr. Chen, but also 5 other neighbors, some she recognized from passing in the hallways and others she'd never met. "Good morning," Mr. Chen said with a warm smile. "We're not interrupting, are we?" "Not at all," Jasmine replied, surprised at the small gathering. "Is everything okay?" A woman in her 60s stepped forward. "I'm Linda from 4C. We wanted to thank you properly for what you did." "I didn't really do anything," Jasmine said, slightly embarrassed. "I just changed my Wi-Fi password." "And in doing so, you exposed a scheme that was costing all of us money," said a younger man with glasses who introduced himself as Raj from 1A. The building manager calculated that Karen's mining operation was adding almost $300 a month to our shared electricity bill. "We've all been paying higher fees because of her. Plus, there's the identity theft issue," added a pregnant woman named Tanya. After they searched Karen's apartment, they found folders of personal information on almost everyone in the building. Who knows what she might have done with that information if she hadn't been caught? Jasmine hadn't heard this detail. That's terrifying. "The HOA is implementing new security measures," Mr. Chen explained. Her brother-in-law resigned from the board in shame. Apparently, he had no idea what she was doing. "Or so he claims," Linda added with a skeptical raise of her eyebrow. Raj held up a gift bag. "Anyway, we wanted to give you this. It's just a small token of our appreciation." Jasmine accepted the bag, touched by the gesture. Inside was a beautiful houseplant in a ceramic pot, a bottle of wine, and a card signed by what looked like dozens of residents. "There's something else," Tanya said. "We're organizing a building-wide meeting next week about digital security. We were hoping you might share some basic tips, being a software engineer and all." Jasmine was surprised they knew her profession, but then remembered the local news coverage had mentioned it. "I'd be happy to," she said sincerely. "Basic password security, recognizing phishing attempts, that kind of thing." "Exactly," Linda nodded enthusiastically. "Most of us older folks could use a primer." After what happened with Karen, everyone's worried about their personal information. After chatting for a few more minutes and agreeing on a time for the security workshop, her neighbors left. Jasmine closed the door, smiling at the unexpected turn of events. When she'd moved in, she'd hoped to eventually get to know her neighbors. She hadn't expected it would happen quite like this. Later that afternoon, as Jasmine was preparing for her first day back at the office after working remotely during her move, her phone rang. It was David Lee, the previous owner of her condo. "Ms. Williams," he said when she answered. "Detective Rivera gave me your number. I wanted to apologize for what happened with the internet situation." "You have nothing to apologize for," Jasmine assured him. "You couldn't have known what Karen was doing. Still, it's unsettling. I lived there for 5 years and thought of Karen as a friend. She offered to help monitor the property while it was on the market. I had no idea she was setting up mining equipment in my name." They talked for a few more minutes, with David sharing stories about the building and neighborhood that made Jasmine laugh. Despite the unusual beginning, she was growing more certain she'd made the right choice in buying this condo. After hanging up, Jasmine opened her laptop to prepare some notes for the security workshop. She decided to start with the basics, the importance of strong, unique passwords and regular password changes. She couldn't help but smile at the irony. Her routine security measure, changing a default password, had not only protected her own network, but had exposed a criminal operation, saved her neighbors money, and brought the building community together. As Jasmine typed up her notes, she thought about how our smallest actions can sometimes have the biggest impacts. She'd moved to Oakwood Apartments looking for a fresh start and a place to call home. Despite the drama with Karen, or perhaps because of it, she'd found both, along with a community that now looked out for one another. The next morning, Jasmine ran into Paul, the building manager in the lobby. He was hanging a new notice on the community board. "Morning, Ms. Williams," he greeted her cheerfully. "Just putting up information about your digital security workshop. We've got nearly 30 residents signed up already." "That's great," Jasmine said, surprised by the turnout. Paul lowered his voice. "Between you and me, the property management company is implementing new privacy protocols because of what happened. Background checks for all staff, secure document storage, the works." He shook his head. Amazing how one person changing their Wi-Fi password could lead to all this positive change. Jasmine smiled as she headed out the door toward her office. She'd come to realize that sometimes justice works in unexpected ways, and that standing up for what's right, even in something as simple as protecting your own internet connection, can create ripples that extend far beyond your own four walls.